power of purpose and people-centricity. I'm here today with Lori Shaffer, who's Vice President of Global Nonwovens at Kimberly-Clark. Lori, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Helen.
Can you tell me what a purpose-led supply chain is? What does it look like?
Yes, it looks like everyone within the supply chain understanding their reason for being, the purpose behind what they do every day, and how they bring value to the consumer. So for example, within Kimberly-Clark, our purpose is to deliver better care for a better world. And if you think about the brands that we make, like Huggies, Depend, Kotex, those are all designed to provide essential care for our consumers. And we try to do that in a way that minimizes environmental footprint. So that's the better world piece. And I would say for that to be a powerful tool within any organization, people have to understand what it means to them on a personal level and how the role they play in the supply chain contributes to delivering that purpose. Because at the end of the day, it really should inform strategic decision making.
That sounds great. Can you give me an example of how that would be with one person? Say, I'm a middle manager somewhere. Yeah. Give us a little bit of an idea of what that looks like on a personal basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say, within Kimberly-Clark, our CEO, Mike Hsu, actually started rolling out our purpose by sharing his personal story. And then he asked his senior leaders to do the same. And then we cascaded it down all the way to the shop floor to our hourly employees. So if I think about an example of what that looks like more in the manufacturing setting, within the Global Nonwovens division of Kimberly-Clark, we make the advantaged materials that go into products like diapers and adult incontinence pants. And the people who work in our manufacturing facilities, they look at that purpose and they say, we're actually making the materials that provide that better care. And we're working on innovation programs like alternative materials that contain, for example, less plastic or that can be manufactured with a lower carbon footprint. So we're also contributing with our everyday actions to the better world part. And so that's how they connect it back to the personal of what they do every day. And then the layer below that, I guess I would say, is that think about in your everyday life. Like, how can you think about that purpose and how it comes to life for you? Like, do you use the products that your company makes? So I guess Kimberly-Clark's kind of an easy example because we tend to be on the shelf at the Targets and Walmarts of the world. But you think about, for me, those products that we make have shown up at various stages of my life where there's been a lot of uncertainty. So for example, becoming a mom for the first time. They put that baby in your arms and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to keep this human being alive. And you think the last thing I want to worry about is the diapering experience, frankly. Like, I want to make sure that baby doesn't have diaper rash. They're going to be dry and clean throughout the night so they can sleep and I can sleep. And so that's that better care piece. And then thinking about when you choose a brand, right? And it doesn't just apply for a company like Kimberly-Clark, but why are you choosing that brand? Like, you're typically choosing it because it represents something that you care about. People choose things because they're sustainable or because they're known for being high quality. And so that's the value and the power of purpose in the supply chain.
Talk a little bit about internal collaboration within Kimberly-Clark and how important that is.
Yeah, well, if you think within supply chain in particular, the last few years have been very challenging. I think everybody can agree. And there's so many different participants within the supply chain, both internal and external. And it's really important to understand what your partner is doing, right? Like, what are their objectives? What are the things that drive them in terms of their ways of working? And that building of the relationship and that collaboration creates a high trust relationship. And when you have that high trust relationship, when there is a disruption in your supply chain, it's a lot easier to pick up the phone because you know Joe or Sally or whoever it might be. You understand what they do and you understand the role they play in helping you to deliver a solution for the consumer despite that disruption. So that's why I think that collaboration, really both internally and externally, is so very important.
It sounds like that kind of collaboration where you have a pre-existing relationship and also an understanding of what other people are doing, both internally and externally, probably drives a certain amount of problem solving and innovation.
Yes. Yes. And so I would say, the way we do it within Kimberly-Clark, every company is probably different, but we actually do joint objective setting with our partners across the supply chain, because it allows us to understand not only what we're trying to accomplish, but what they're trying to accomplish, and finding where that shared common ground is. Because if you're all working towards that common goal, it just becomes a lot easier to smooth things over when there might be a disagreement, a disconnect, and also when there is an external disruption that you really have no control over, because you're starting from that common ground.
Lori, can you give us some advice about how to improve communications inside a supply chain, inside a company?
Yes. So I would say the best way to improve communication is just to start having it, right? So in my experience, oftentimes people might think like, oh, I sent an email to somebody, so I've communicated to them my objectives and what I'm all about, and they should be fired up about working with me. The reality is there is still no replacement for the phone call or the face-to-face if you have that opportunity. And while I really appreciate the flexibility that COVID brought us with the remote work and all the tools that come along with that, there is still something to say for collaborating more in that real time versus virtual. So that would be my recommendation. If you have the opportunity to do so, pick up the phone, turn on the video so that people can get to know you just a little bit better. And that's where that relationship building comes to play.
I think people have stopped picking up the phone
They have.
these days.
Yes. I IM'd you. Did you not get it? Right. So that with the
I
500
emailed
other
you
ones
again,
I got. Yes,
I just thought,
exactly.
why did you email
yes,
me again?
Yes, yeah. Just doing it 50 times doesn't make it more meaningful.
Indeed. So tell me, what excites you about the future of supply chain? What do you see happening?
Well, I feel like the pace of change within supply chain is just very fast, and consumers are becoming more and more savvy, right? So they have access to information like they've never had before. If they have a positive experience with their brand, honestly, they don't usually say anything. If they have a negative experience, they take to social media oftentimes, which can be very negative for your brand equity. And they really know, honestly, what they want. They can compare options like, again, they've never been able to before. And so what excites me is that as leaders within the supply chain, we have the ability to work end to end to take the information that the consumer is providing, because it is a two-way conversation. It's not just them consuming information. They are also sharing information about their needs and wants. Is we can have a better understanding as a broader supply chain of what brings value for the consumer, and then work together leveraging the technology that we have, which is changing also at a breakneck pace, to really solve some pretty significant challenges for our consumers, to provide them better quality products faster. Right now you can get things within a 2-hour window, right? So thank you, Amazon, for that. But it really has significantly changed our ability to provide a better life for our consumers. And so that to me is the exciting thing, if we can learn to truly collaborate differently and more effectively across that end-to-end supply chain.
It sounds in a way, with the more informed consumer, that there's nowhere to hide in a way. Like
Yes, there is absolutely. And I think that's a good thing, right? I think in the past, as a manufacturer, you might have been able to get away with some things that frankly were not as equitable or ethical as we as consumers might expect. But today I think it's a big risk to do that. And so that protects the consumer and all the members of the supply chain as well, who are doing it the right way.
Lori, would you like to tell us a little bit about Kimberly-Clark and what you're doing there?
Yeah, so within Kimberly-Clark, we are a consumer products company. We celebrated our 150th birthday last year. We've got some pretty awesome brands that most people are probably pretty familiar with, like Huggies, Depend, Kotex, and Kleenex. And what I do within Kimberly-Clark is I have the unique opportunity to work with people far smarter than myself, scientists and PhDs, who are developing the materials of the future that are more sustainable, that don't contain plastic or alternatives to plastic, that can be reused and recycled to create more positive experiences for our consumers with a less environmental footprint. So that's what I do within Kimberly-Clark.
Lori, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We've been talking about the power of purpose and people-centricity with Lori Shaffer from Kimberly-Clark. Thank you for watching.